Jamar Chase suspended for Week 12's game against the New England Patriots for spitting on Jalen Ramsey. He can potentially appeal this, but I don't know about all that. So this was caught on video. He spat on Ramsey. Not great. Not something you should do to other people at all. Certainly not even on the football field. But Boone, what are we doing with this news that Jamar Chase is going to miss this game?
Well, first, I just want to double down on that. Like, it's just such a gross move. Like, it's such a coward move. Stand gross. Up. Like, stand your ground here. But what are we doing spitting on people? And this isn't even just a one-off. We've seen this happen now multiple times this year during the NFL season. Like, it's just crazy. Regardless, what are we doing? I mean, there's not that much to do off of this news, right? It's unfortunate that Chase now is going to miss a game. And I don't think the NFL even wants to suspend one of their best players, but they have to. They set the precedent. There's a 1-game suspension for this act. So he's got to miss a game now here. And I mean, who really benefits? Like, it's T. Higgins is the only one that really is going to get somewhat of a boost here. He still has a very tough matchup in this game, though, because Christian Gonzalez is on the other side. But Higgins has been cooking lately, right? 6 touchdowns in his last 6 games. He's got a 4-game touchdown streak going, 5 over the last 4. So he's going to be fine. He's going to do well, and will probably make it into the top 12 of my rankings, even with the tough matchup. But other than that, there's not really anyone that I'm super excited about now that Chase is going to miss this game, right? Joe Flacco is going to take a huge hit, because I think the fact that Flacco had this environment with these awesome weapons around him is one of the reasons why he's been doing so well. I don't think he's going to have a great game with Chase out of the lineup. Andre Yoshivas, like, he's only like a flex option. He's not somebody that we can feel super confident about putting into our lineups. He's a guy that could have a decent game, but he's still very, very volatile. I don't really know where else you go here, Harmon, other than just to say that T. Higgins, who is an overqualified number 2 receiver and a guy that deserves probably to be a number 1 somewhere, is going to get his shot again, like we've seen before, to be the top guy in this offense. And it's a role that he can definitely excel in.
And like you said, it's a bummer because going against his Patriots defense, he's going to now get that shadow coverage from Christian Gonzalez on the other side, which makes the day that much more difficult. And really, I think, is problematic if you are streaming Joe Flacco, which I have been in our office league that we have talked about a lot, which don't know if I'm going to win this week because I'm so invested in Cowboys, and unfortunately that game is happening tonight. So don't know if I'm even going to win this week for this to matter or not. But yeah, I've been playing Joe Flacco on a weekly basis. Didn't go great last week. Now I'm concerned without Jamar Chase if I can stream Flacco with T. Higgins likely going up against Jamar Chase and all these ancillary guys. You know, Andre Yoshivas is okay. He doesn't do much unless one of these guys are out. I don't think you would take him into like the Michael Wilson zone as we saw last week when Marvin Harrison Jr. left this past week's game. And obviously Michael Wilson went completely crazy. I'm sure we're going to talk about him in the waiver wire section. But even the tight ends, 17 routes for Tanner Hudson, 17 routes for Noah Fant, who caught 5 balls. I don't even think those guys get. Maybe Fant, if you're absolutely desperate at tight end, could potentially be interesting with Jamar Chase out. But we're probably just hoping that this Bengals team, which has run the ball a little bit better of late, can really try to establish that. But Chase Brown is also in a tough matchup as well. So maybe we're just hoping for some of those check down machine moments for Chase Brown. So yeah, it's just not great for anyone streaming Joe Flacco, but I don't know that I'm rushing to boost anyone else up in my rankings based on this news. Let's get to some more unfortunate headlines here. Down in Atlanta, we've got a 2-pack here. Number 1, Michael Penix is likely out for the season. This report came in from Adam Schefter this morning. The Falcons quarterback Michael Penix suffered a potentially season-ending knee injury during Sunday's loss to the Panthers. Penix going to be seeking a second opinion, but it's not encouraging. This was kind of one of those news pieces, Boone, where the more that trickled out, the worse it got. You know, yesterday it's, he aggravated the knee injury that he had a bone bruise in earlier this season. And then now it looks like there might be some damage to his ACL, which he tore his ACL. He tore both of his ACLs in college. He's had multiple knee injuries. So he's likely done for the season after having some damage done to that ACL. He's going to be going on IR at the very least. So the Falcons are pretty much done for the year. This is also coupled with Drake London is going to miss at least this next week's game with a PCL injury. I want to point out the PCL part of this because PCL sprain has essentially ruined the season of Brock Bowers in the first half of the year. And Ricky Pearsall was out multiple weeks with essentially the same injury. I saw a few folks point out as well that Puka Nacua missed a chunk of last season's time with a PCL injury. So I am definitely preparing for more than just this week for Drake London to be out, which is really horrible for me personally. So Falcons, how cooked are the Falcons at this point, Boone?
They're about as cooked as my laptop almost was. I didn't realize it was almost about to die. So I fortunately just grabbed the charger while you were talking there and plugged it in, because we were down to, we were less than 5% there. I didn't notice. And that's kind of where we're at with the Falcons right now, man. Like, they're losing all 5%. These pieces. They're losing the power to their offense. Drake London has been fantastic this season. Without him out there, we are bumping everybody down. And unfortunately, that includes Bijan Robinson, who this week reminded everybody that, yes, he is a superstar. He is absolutely awesome. But with these pieces going away and such a huge guy like Drake London, what does that mean for this offense? Like, I would argue that I think we put this entire offense, with the exception of Bijan Robinson, into the coping corner. Like, Drake London is not going to be himself for a while. I don't think he's going to miss time. And when he comes back, are we really going to trust him right away after what we've seen from those other guys that you mentioned who've dealt with similar injuries this year? So I don't know. Like, you look at it down the stretch, and I know they got a couple matchups coming up, like the Saints, the Jets. They should stay competitive. They should be able to run the ball in those games. So Bijan's still, a high-end RB, but like, other than that, Tyler Algier, the chances for him getting those touchdowns, those vulture touchdowns, that's going to be reduced. Kyle Pitts has had easy matchups the last few weeks. He's not really coming through here. So do you trust that he's going to be somebody that's going to be able to step up and really deliver? I'm not so sure about that. If he hasn't really hit it before in these easier matchups, is he really going to get the volume, and is he really going to be able to produce like a consistent tight end one for you where you feel good about him in your lineup? I just don't. I don't feel very confident about him in that way. And then Darnell Mooney, he enters the wide receiver 3 flex conversation because you would hope that increased volume and him potentially being the number one here could do something. And yet he's had a ton of targets. The last 2 games, he's had 15 targets total, 8 and 7, and he's really delivered barely anything on it, right? 4 catches for 51 yards total over those 2 games. So how could you really feel great about putting him in your lineup? I think it's a bad situation all around. And I would feel, and I do have him on some teams, having Bijan Robinson right now doesn't feel as good as it felt even Sunday before these injuries happened, when he was absolutely going off in that game.
No, it certainly doesn't. And it's almost not even worth putting any of these guys in the coping corner, because who has a lot of hope for any of these players? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We've seen this before. We've seen the Kirk Cousins, no Drake London offense in that game week 8 against the Miami Dolphins. That was their fewest plays run of the season with 49, and their second fewest drives that ended in a score, because they got blanked 30-0 by the Carolina Panthers back in week 3. So obviously they didn't score on any of those drives, but they only scored on 18% of those drives. It was their second lowest success rate from an offensive standpoint, that week 8 game, with Kirk Cousins starting and no Drake London. So yeah, it's a huge bummer here, especially for those of us like myself who love Drake London. And like, there was a narrative that he just doesn't have the ceiling type games that you want out of a true wide receiver 1. He had finishes of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 1, and wide receiver 1 on the weeks so far this season. So it really was the year where he was fully coming into bloom with Michael Penix. And now I agree that he's obviously in a tough spot in this week's, in just the rest of the season. Even next year, man, I wonder what's going to be happening with this Falcons team, because are we going to look at a coaching change here? They don't have their first round pick, which is almost certainly going to be a top 10 selection in this year's draft. Just really weird. So brutal. Just a really weird situation for this franchise at this point.
Yeah, and I find it interesting because what we've seen from Penix so far, I don't think they can feel confident about him being the long-term starter. But I don't know, like you said, are they really going to have a choice? Like, could they go out and potentially get a veteran quarterback to join the mix, because they're not going to have the first round pick? And what's interesting, and this is a conversation for another day, is will the Rams potentially use that pick on a quarterback? I think that might be what ends up happening, right? Because they're going to need a replacement for Stafford at some point. So anyway, you look back at the Falcons, and they're going to have to, roll with Penix, it seems like, moving forward, even though the results this year have been very up and down. And I don't think you can come away having faith that he's going to be that true quality long-term starter for them.
Nope. And again, is it the same coaching staff back next year that fell in love with Michael Penix and made the aggressive choice to take him in the top 10 after giving all that money to Kirk Cousins? Just been a lot of curious choices by the Atlanta Falcons that this front office and this coaching staff went to the mat to defend. And I don't think that any of them have really aged very well. So, Nate and I talked about this with Michael Penix. I think he's shown you enough things that I'd want to give him another year and just kind of see what happens. But I would have also liked to see him the rest of this year to really know for sure how good I feel about that. So if that job opens up, I'm not even sure how attractive of a job it is. So it's a lot to discuss with this Falcons team. But from a fantasy football perspective, I'm with Boone's analysis here that even Bijan Robinson, who still is a running back one and somebody you're playing every single week, I think a little bit of the shine comes off him. And then the rest of these guys are picking at scraps because Mooney's had a pretty bad year. And Kyle Pitts is fine, but he's not the needle mover that people thought he was coming into the NFL. A guy who's certainly a needle mover. We don't always talk about offensive line injuries here, but we got to talk about this one. Lane Johnson has a Liz Frank injury. Adam Schefter reported that Eagles 5-time All-Pro offensive tackle Lane Johnson suffered a Liz Frank injury during Sunday night's win over the Lions. He's not expected to be season-ending, but he could be headed to injured reserve. Could miss like 4 to 6 weeks here, I think, is the initial timeline. Cowboys, Bears, Chargers, Raiders, the next 4 game for the Eagles offense. Again, Boone, this is a needle mover here. Lane Johnson is one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL, period. He's been probably the best right tackle in football this year, but he has dealt with a lot of injuries this season, and this one looks like it's going to take him away from an offense that needs the help for at least the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, we were hoping that things were going to get on track here for the Eagles, and now you take him away. Such a huge loss, like you were saying. And I saw Bill Barnwell had that stat. Since 2013, the Eagles are the 3rd best offense by EPA per play with Lane Johnson on the field, 28th without him on the field during that span. So a huge, huge difference, right? One end to the other, a massive loss, and one that, like you said at the top there, like that I think fantasy managers, especially casual fantasy managers, probably won't give enough importance to, because there's only a handful of offensive linemen that I think actually do move the needle. We often see like if an offensive line loses 3 or 4 pieces, that can start to move things, but there's only a few guys that them going out can totally change things for an offense. And clearly he is one of them. So I'm worried here, Harmon. I mean, we've seen all the stars on this team be pretty volatile, be pretty disappointing this year, very inconsistent for fantasy. And now we're taking away the anchor for that offensive line. And it's a big downgrade to all these guys. And then you go back and you look at the schedule, like you were just pointing out, right? Cowboys, Bears, Chargers, Raiders. Those are the next 4. Also the Commanders and the Bills, which are, those defenses aren't great. Those are fairly easy matchups as well. So it's not a bad run out schedule wise. I am going to bump these guys down a little bit just because I do think he's such a huge loss for the offense. And yet I wonder if, because some of these easier opponents coming up, maybe they will be able to balance it out a little bit and survive and be decent for fantasy. So, I mean, for me, Saquon, I think he's down now in that low end RB1 range. And if it wasn't for the schedule, I'd be talking about him as an RB2. Devonta Smith, kind of volatile as well, right? Like the wide receiver 2, we really like him. We love the talent. And yet now, is this passing attack going to be as effective without Lane Johnson out there protecting it? AJ Brown, I mean, we talked about him last week, just so boomer bust. Yeah. And I'll give you credit because I think at one point you said, he's more of like a boomer bust wide receiver 3. And I was trying to hold on to the wide receiver 2 thing. Definitely not the case. Like he is down in that wide receiver 3 range now. And Dallas Goedert, just a touchdown or bust guy too. So this offense for fantasy, going into the season, you would have thought these were guys that were going to lead you to a fantasy title. And now I think you're just hoping to get decent production from them so that they can hold down a couple spots in your lineup and the rest of your guys can get you over the top.
I pointed this out on the Solar Recap last night that in the game that we saw last night, Sunday Night Football, there were 5 players participating in that game that were drafted inside the top 35 picks in fantasy football drafts. It didn't feel that way. It did not feel like that type of offensive game on Sunday Night Football, but that is a fact. One last just kind of downstream, I think, negative effect here as we're doing the Ray Garvin fear-mongering on Saquon Barkley is that we're looking at this depth chart right now if you're watching on YouTube. Lane Johnson, obviously the starting right tackle. Fred Johnson steps in here for him as the right tackle. He had been a part of their kind of jumbo packages where he's that 6th offensive lineman, which has really, I think, when they've done that, boosted some of Saquon Barkley's rushing efficiency, which has been very up and down as the offensive line has been a little banged up this year. And now that he's just the right tackle, now they're bringing back, Grant Calcaterra and these second tight ends who can't really block. So if you're looking for any more reasons that have Saquon Barkley as not really the player that you hoped he would be, that's yet another reason you're taking away some of those jumbo packages, because Fred Johnson now has to actually start at right tackle. So not a great situation. We'll talk more Eagles later on in the show when we get to the panic meter. Let's talk the Jets benching Justin Fields for Tyrod Taylor. Diana Rossini reported today that the Jets are making a quarterback change. They're benching Justin Fields in favor of veteran Tyrod Taylor per sources. New York faces Baltimore in Week 12 and ranks last in the league in passing yards per game. I don't know if Diana really needed to throw that last note in there. I think we all know the Jets passing game stinks, but yes, I think it's over for Justin Fields. I think we can finally say he has been in our coping corner for quite some time. The Jets are now also putting him in the coping corner.
Yeah, and weirdly, this is kind of a positive for the offense, like for the passing attack. We've talked about that before, but how much of a positive can it be for fantasy when you don't have Garrett Wilson out there? Like, how excited can you get about anybody in New York when you don't have him out there in the passing attack? And Ravens, Falcons, Dolphins, Saints, the schedule is not even that bad. Like, I remember before the season looking at the Jets as a team that down the stretch had a fairly easy schedule, but when everything goes off the rails like this, I don't even know that it matters. Like, the Ravens are healthier now. The Dolphins are pretty feisty, as we've seen in the last few weeks. So even some of those matchups where they might look green when you look at, strength schedule and fantasy points allowed and all that sort of stuff, I don't know that they're as easy as we would have thought that they were a month or so. And when you break it down, I mean, like Breece Hall, volatile fantasy RB2, we know he still has the upside anytime, he could break a long run and have a decent day. And yet you don't really feel great about him in your lineup. And that's what this Monday show's all about, right? Like, who are you playing that you are just so scared and your knees are, rattling together when you're putting them in your lineup? I feel like Breece Hall's that kind of guy, even though he still has the ceiling, like we saw a few weeks ago when they had an easier matchup. Mason Taylor, just like a deep streamer. And he's kind of in like the Noah Fant group, right? Where like you're looking at these guys, but they're just like low end tight end twos. There's so many better options that you're not really going to put these guys out there. I think A.D. Mitchell is the one that I'm still, that I love this dude. I'm still holding the candle for him. I know like it looks terrible. It doesn't look like it's going to work out, but he can still win in these routes. He can still go up against some of the best cover men in the league and deliver. He just can't finish. And maybe, at least give him a chance over the next few weeks with Tyrod Taylor out there. Give him a shot to see if he can develop a little, if he can get more comfortable in that offense and maybe start to make some of these plays. But yeah, his entire career, he's had issues with finishing these big plays. And at this point, I am starting to get a little worried on that A.D. Mitchell hill that it's never going to happen for him. I'd end up just like sliding down the bottom of the hill, but we're not quite there yet. We're just getting close.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen, but I'm with you that I just have a sick pup fascination for seeing how it goes for A.D. Mitchell, and you probably have a better chance of evaluating him the rest of the way. I mean, he obviously he's got to catch the damn football when it comes his way, of course, but you probably have a better chance of evaluating him if Tyrod Taylor is under center and just figuring out how many of these guys are going to be a part of your future going forward. Last note on this. God, the 2022 wide receiver class, I loved that class. Garrett Wilson, Drake London, and Chris Olave at the top of it. I thought those guys just got put in horrible situations to start their career. Some of them have not come out of horrible situations. They just have had such bad luck. And now we're sitting here talking about, Garrett Wilson not even involved in this Tyrod Taylor little bump. Drake London has a damn PCL injury. The healthiest guy, maybe paired with the best quarterback right now, is Chris Olave with Tyler Shuck in New Orleans. Like, what universe are we living in? I just will never get over how unlucky that class has been in the NFL. Last piece of news here before we go to break. Josh Jacobs does sound like he dodged a major injury. Report from Ian Rappaport that Packers standout running back Josh Jacobs, no structural damage to the knee. It is structurally sound. No surgery is needed. He's considered day-to-day. I've also seen Rob Domofsky of ESPN say he's week-to-week, so a little bit of a murky timeline there, Boone, but I know we're talking Packers running backs when we get to the waiver wire later.
Yeah, I know when the news first came out and it was like, it's not season ending. It was like, everyone was like, oh, okay, great. But my initial response was like, it's not season ending. Were we even talking about it being season ending? Like, that
Right.
sounds even more concerning to me that that was even potentially on the table here. So we'll see how it goes. I think Rob Domofsky is probably more accurate, that it's going to be more of a week to week thing, and the team will play it off as day to day and try to get other defenses to, game plan for him and that sort of thing. But it seems like he's going to miss a little time here. So then obviously, not to spoil the waiver wire section, but Emmanuel Wilson came in. He got most of the work. He's been pretty productive in the opportunities that he got. So he is certainly one of the top ads on the waiver wire this week, and a guy that can step right into this offense and produce. He's not going to be Josh Jacobs. He's not the same kind of player as Jacobs, but he's going to get the opportunity, and they need this running game to continue to produce because the passing attack at times has been all over the place. So let's hope that Wilson can get out there and give fantasy managers some good production, because we haven't had a lot of guys, especially at running back, come off the waiver wire this year and step into lineups and deliver. And now's that time of the season when we often see some of these injuries pop up to big running backs. And could Wilson be that guy that over the next few weeks here really propels teams forward and gets people into the fantasy playoffs? I think there's a chance that he could be.